I stood in the grand ballroom of the Ashford estate, my navy dress feeling suddenly too plain among the sea of designer gowns shimmering under crystal chandeliers. Madison's voice cut through the classical music and champagne-fueled chatter. "This is my sister," she said, gesturing toward me with a careless wave. "She helps around the house sometimes." Laughter rippled through the crowd of wealthy guests, their eyes sliding over me dismissively. My champagne glass trembled in my hand as heat flooded my face. Madison's fiancé Derek smirked from beside her, his arm draped possessively around her waist. I stood frozen, invisible to everyone in that glittering room, reduced to hired help in my own family. But they didn't know something. They had no idea that I had paid for this entire venue. My hands shook as I set my champagne glass down on the nearest table. The crystal clinked against the marble surface, the sound somehow cutting through my humiliation and giving me a moment of clarity. I lifted my chin and spoke, my voice clearer than I expected. "Actually," I said, and the conversations around me began to fade, "I own a property management company. I paid for this venue as my engagement gift to Madison." The ballroom went silent. It was the kind of silence that feels heavy, where you can hear the rustle of expensive fabric and the subtle shift of uncomfortable feet. Guests exchanged confused glances, their champagne glasses paused halfway to their lips. I watched Madison's face drain of color for exactly 1 second, maybe 2. Her perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide the flash of panic in her eyes. But my sister recovered fast. She always did. Madison threw her head back and laughed, the sound bright and practiced. "Oh, Colleen," she said loudly, "always so generous. But you shouldn't have told everyone about our arrangement." She emphasized that last word, giving it weight, making it mean something it didn't. The guests leaned in slightly, their curiosity piqued. Madison's voice took on a sympathetic tone that made my stomach turn. "Our father left her his business when he passed," she explained to the room, "but she never helped Mom when she was sick. This is her way of making amends." The guests' expressions shifted instantly. The confusion melted into understanding, then judgment. They looked at me differently now, seeing not generosity but guilt, not a gift but an obligation being fulfilled. I stood there, stunned into speechlessness. None of it was true. Our mother wasn't sick, had never been sick. She was healthy and playing tennis 3 times a week. Our father's business had been small, just a modest property management operation with 3 rental units. I had built my own company from nothing, growing it over 8 years into something I was proud of. But how could I argue without sounding defensive? How could I explain without seeming like I was attacking my own sister at her engagement party? Derek pulled Madison closer, his voice carrying across the ballroom. "It's really big of you to forgive her, babe." Other guests nodded sympathetically toward Madison, their faces soft with understanding for her supposed burden of having a sister who had neglected their dying mother. Someone even patted Madison's arm consolingly. The realization hit me like ice water. My own good deed had been twisted into proof of my guilt. Madison had been ready for this. She had known I would eventually mention paying for the venue. She had prepared her counterstory, had practiced her sympathetic tone, had probably even rehearsed with Derek. My sister had been 3 steps ahead of me this entire time, and I had walked right into her trap. I felt the walls closing in, the judgmental stares pressing against me from all sides. My throat tightened and I couldn't form words that would make sense, couldn't find a way to defend myself that wouldn't make everything worse. So I did the only thing I could. I left. I walked quickly through the ballroom, my plain navy dress suddenly feeling like armor, something that marked me as different, as less than. I pushed through the heavy doors and into the marble corridor, my heels clicking too loudly against the floor. I kept walking until I reached the parking lot, the cool evening air hitting my flushed face. At least it was over. At least I could distance myself from Madison now, cut ties with someone who would humiliate me so publicly. I reached my car and fumbled with my keys, my hands still shaking from adrenaline and hurt. My phone buzzed in my clutch. I almost ignored it, but something made me look. An email from Jenna, my business partner. The subject line read, "Emergency." I opened it with growing dread. "Colleen, I need to talk to you immediately." Madison's fiancé is Derek Hartwell, as in Hartwell Industries, as in our biggest potential client. Call me now. My stomach dropped. Derek's last name. I had never put it together, because Madison had always just called him Derek, and I had been too stressed about the engagement party to pay attention to details. Hartwell Industries was supposed to be our salvation. We had been negotiating with them for months for a property management contract that would be worth $300,000. Contract negotiations were scheduled to start next week, and I had just been publicly painted as a neglectful daughter who abandoned her dying mother by Derek's future wife. In front of Derek, who was about to become family with the woman who had just destroyed my reputation. I sat in my car, engine off, staring at my phone screen as the full scope of the disaster became clear. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was my business, my livelihood, my future. And Madison had just put all of it directly in her crosshairs. The next morning, I met Jenna at our office before sunrise. She was already there when I arrived, pacing in front of the windows with her coffee growing cold on her desk. Her normally composed face was tight with worry. The Hartwell deal is 40% of our annual revenue, Colleen, she said without preamble. 40%. If Derek speaks negatively about you to his father, we lose everything. Richard Hartwell makes all the final decisions, and he values family opinion, especially his son's opinion. I sank into my desk chair, exhaustion making my bones feel heavy. I had barely slept, running scenarios through my head all night. Every scenario ended badly. My phone rang. Madison's name flashed on the screen. Jenna and I exchanged looks. I answered, putting it on speaker. "We need to talk about the wedding," Madison said. Her voice was sickly sweet, the tone she used when she wanted something. "I need you to understand something, Colleen. Derek was very upset last night. He told his father about our family situation. I've been trying to smooth things over, but you know how impressions matter in business." The threat was crystal clear. She wasn't even pretending anymore. "I'll pay for the wedding," I heard myself say. The words felt like they were coming from someone else, someone desperate and trapped. "How much?" $75,000, Madison said immediately, as if she had been waiting for me to ask. "The wedding is in 3 months. I'll send you the payment schedule." I closed my eyes. I could afford it, barely, but it would drain my business reserves completely. Those reserves were supposed to fund our expansion after we secured the Hartwell contract. But if I refused, Madison would poison Derek against me, and we would lose the contract anyway. Either way, I lost. "Fine," I said. Madison's triumphant laugh made me feel sick. "I'm so glad we could work this out," she said. "Family is everything, right?" She hung up. Jenna stared at me. $75,000? "Colleen, we need that money for the business." "I know," I said quietly. "But what choice do I have?" 2 days later, Madison sent me the vendor list. I opened the attachment with a sense of foreboding that proved justified. The budget wasn't $75,000 anymore. It was $120,000. I called her immediately. "Madison, you said $75,000. "I made some upgrades," she said casually. "You don't mind, do you? After all, you owe the family so much more than money." Her voice hardened. "And Colleen? I know about the Hartwell contract. It would be such a shame if Derek's father heard more about your character issues." She was openly blackmailing me now. This wasn't about a wedding gift or family reconciliation. This was calculated financial warfare. I realized with growing horror that Madison had been planning this for months. The engagement party humiliation had just been the opening move. "I'll pay it," I said through clenched teeth. What choice did I have? That afternoon, my banker called. "Miss Stewart, I'm calling about your loan application. I'm afraid we have to deny it." When I pressed for details, he was uncomfortable. "There have been some concerns raised about your financial stability. Nothing concrete, you understand. But we have to be cautious." I traced the rumors back through my professional network. They had started at Madison's engagement party and spread like wildfire through the business community. Guests who owned companies, who knew other business owners, who valued reputation above all else. Madison's lies about my neglecting our dying mother had morphed into whispers about my financial irresponsibility, my unreliability, my questionable character. My professional reputation was being systematically destroyed, and I was paying $120,000 for the privilege. Jenna found me staring at my computer screen, frozen. "We got 3 more client cancellations today," she said quietly. "People are asking questions about your family situation, about whether you're stable enough to manage their properties." I couldn't speak. My sister was strangling my business to death while I watched, helpless. My phone rang. The screen showed a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was local and prestigious. I answered. "Miss Stewart? This is Richard Hartwell. We need to discuss your company's bid for our contract. And perhaps some family matters my son mentioned. Are you available for dinner tomorrow evening?" My hands went cold. I was about to be confronted by Derek's powerful father about Madison's lies, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. "Yes," I managed to say. "Tomorrow is fine." "Excellent. I'll send you the restaurant details." He paused. "Bring any documentation you feel is relevant to our discussion." He hung up. I stared at my phone, my mind racing. Documentation. That meant he had already heard Madison's version and wanted me to defend myself. But how do you defend against lies that have already taken root? How do you prove something didn't happen? I spent that night gathering every document I could think of. Bank statements showing my business growth, tax returns proving I had built my company independently, medical records showing our mother was healthy, anything that might counter Madison's narrative. But as I organized the papers, I felt a growing sense of futility. Richard Hartwell didn't know me. He knew his son, who was about to marry my sister. If it came down to believing a stranger or believing family, I already knew how that story ended. I arrived at the restaurant 15 minutes early, clutching a folder of documents I had carefully organized. The hostess led me to a private dining room in the back. When she opened the door, my stomach plummeted. Richard Hartwell sat at the head of the table, distinguished in his tailored suit, but he wasn't alone. Madison was there, looking elegant and composed. Derek sat beside her, his jaw tight. And worst of all, my mother Patricia was there too, dressed in her best outfit, her face arranged in an expression of sad concern. This wasn't a business meeting, this was an ambush. "Colleen, honey," my mother said, standing to embrace me. I stood rigid in her arms. "We're here because we love you and we're worried about you." The realization crashed over me. This was staged as an intervention. I had been set up. "Please, sit down," Richard said, gesturing to the empty chair. His voice was kind but firm, the voice of someone used to being in control. "I think we all need to have an honest conversation." I sat because I had no choice. My folder of documents suddenly felt useless. What good were bank statements against the united front of my own family? Patricia spoke first, and I had to admire the performance. Her voice trembled with maternal concern as she turned to Richard. "My daughter has always been troubled," she said. "Even as a child, she was competitive with Madison, jealous of any attention her sister received." She paused, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "After my husband died, it got worse. She became fixated on the idea that the family owed her something." Madison added her part seamlessly. "I tried to include her, Mr. Hartwell. I asked her to be part of my wedding planning, to share in my happiness. But she's been demanding money, making wild accusations." She took a shaky breath. "I'm worried about her mental state. The things she's been posting online, the messages she sends to our friends." I started to speak, but Derek interrupted. "My father values family unity above all else, Colleen. Madison has shown him the concerning behavior you've exhibited. We're trying to help you, but you have to be willing to accept that help." The trap was perfect. If I defended myself, I looked defensive and unstable. If I stayed quiet, I accepted their narrative. Every word I said would be used as evidence of my supposed issues. But I tried anyway. "None of this is true," I said, looking directly at Richard. "My mother was never sick. I never neglected her. I built my business on my own. These accusations about my mental state Are fabrications designed to discredit me professionally? Patricia's face crumpled. She's been saying things like this for months. Paranoid delusions that were conspiring against her. She turned to Richard. I'm at my wit's end. I don't know how to help her anymore. I opened my folder with shaking hands. I have documentation. Medical records showing my mother is healthy. Business records proving my company's legitimacy. Bank statements showing my financial stability. Richard held up a hand. Miss Stewart, I appreciate your preparation, but what concerns me isn't your business credentials, it's your relationship with your family. He leaned forward, his expression sympathetic but firm. In my experience, a person who treats their family poorly will eventually treat business partners the same way. Family is the foundation of character. The room tilted. He had already made his decision. The documents didn't matter. Madison and Patricia had painted me as an unreliable, mentally unstable person who couldn't be trusted, and Richard believed them because they were family, and family wouldn't lie about something so serious. I'm afraid Hartwell Industries can't move forward with your company, Richard said. The words felt like a physical blow. It's not personal, Miss Stewart. It's about risk management and the values we uphold. I strongly suggest you seek professional help and work on mending these family relationships. Madison's face was a mask of concern, but I saw the triumph in her eyes. She had won. She had turned my own good deed at the engagement party into a weapon, had mobilized our mother as an ally, and had destroyed my biggest business opportunity in one carefully orchestrated dinner. We all stood to leave. As we filed out of the private dining room, Madison leaned close to me, her voice too low for anyone else to hear. You should have just stayed small and grateful, she whispered. Now I'll take everything. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Jenna. 2 more clients just canceled. What's happening? I stood on the sidewalk outside the restaurant, watching my family climb into their respective cars. Madison and Derek drove off together in his luxury sedan. Patricia got into her car and left without looking back at me. Not one of them had asked if I needed a ride, if I was okay, if any part of my story might be true. I called Jenna. Her voice was tight with panic when she answered. We just lost Sanderson Properties and the Garcia account, she said. Both called within the last hour. Colleen, what happened at that dinner? I lost the Hartwell contract, I said. My voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. And I think Madison has been calling our other clients. There was a long silence. How bad is this going to get? Jenna asked. I don't know, I said. But I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. I drove home in a daze, my mind trying to process the scope of the betrayal. My own mother had looked Richard Hartwell in the eye and called me mentally unstable. Madison had orchestrated the whole thing with Derek's help. They had systematically dismantled my credibility, my business, and my reputation in one efficient strike. When I pulled into my apartment complex parking lot, I saw something taped to my door. I climbed the stairs slowly, exhaustion making each step feel impossible. It was an eviction notice. My landlord was selling the building. I had 30 days to vacate. I ripped the notice down and went inside, locking the door behind me. I sat on my couch in the dark apartment and tried to understand how my life had fallen apart so completely in less than a week. From the engagement party humiliation to this moment, it had been a relentless cascade of disasters, each one worse than the last. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Miss Stewart, this is the property management office for your building. I wanted to give you a courtesy call about the sale. The buyer is a company called D. Hartwell LLC. They're taking possession next month. D. Hartwell, Derek Hartwell. Madison and Derek weren't just evicting me from my home. They were making sure I knew it was personal. I hung up without responding. I sat in the dark, the eviction notice crumpled in my lap, and felt the full weight of my sister's hatred. This wasn't about money or business anymore. This was about destruction. Madison wanted me erased, eliminated, reduced to nothing. And she had the resources and the ruthlessness to make it happen. I hadn't slept in 2 days. My business was hemorrhaging clients faster than I could count them. I was facing eviction in less than 30 days. My mother wouldn't return my increasingly desperate calls. I stood on the scale in my bathroom and realized I had lost 15 pounds from stress in less than 2 weeks. My clothes hung loose on my frame and I looked hollow-eyed in the mirror. Jenna asked to meet at a coffee shop near our office. I knew from her voice on the phone that this wasn't going to be good news. I was right. She couldn't look at me as she spoke. "Colleen, I have kids, I have a mortgage. I can't risk my reputation being tied to yours anymore." She pushed a document across the table. "I want to dissolve our partnership." I picked up the paper with numb fingers. She was offering me $50,000 for my half of a company worth $2 million. It was robbery, but we both knew I had no leverage. The company was worthless without clients, and the clients were gone. "Madison approached me 3 weeks ago," Jenna said quietly. "She told me this was coming. She said if I sided with you, she would make sure I lost clients too. But if I distanced myself from you, she promised Derek would use his connections to bring me new clients." She finally looked at me. "I'm sorry, Colleen. I really am. But you have to understand." I understood perfectly. Madison had been building her trap long before the engagement party. She had been methodically identifying every support structure in my life and systematically destroying it. Jenna was just another piece falling into place. I signed the dissolution papers. What choice did I have? That afternoon, I discovered something that made my blood run cold. A friend sent me screenshots of social media accounts in my name. Accounts I had never created. They were posting erratic, angry content, accusing former friends of betrayal, sending bizarre messages to business associates, making me look exactly as unstable as Madison had claimed I was. Madison had been impersonating me online. She had been creating the evidence of my supposed breakdown, fabricating proof of her lies. I tried to report the accounts, but the process was slow and bureaucratic. In the meantime, my friends were receiving these messages and pulling away. My phone calls went unreturned. My text messages were left on read. Madison was isolating me completely. Then came the legal letter. Madison was suing me for defamation. She claimed I had been spreading malicious lies about her character and her relationship with Derek. The lawsuit was baseless, frivolous even, but defending against it would cost thousands of dollars I didn't have. More importantly, it would further cement the narrative that I was the problem, that I was so bitter and jealous that I was lashing out legally at my own sister. The lawyer's letter sat on my kitchen counter for 2 days before I opened it fully. Inside was a detailed list of supposed defamatory statements I had made. I recognized none of them. They were probably from the fake social media accounts Madison had created in my name. She was suing me for things she had said while pretending to be me. The circular logic was almost beautiful in its cruelty. I needed money. I needed resources. I thought of the one thing I still had, my father's life insurance policy. It was small, just $50,000, but it was mine. Dad had named me as beneficiary 3 years ago, right before he died. I had never touched it, keeping it as a security blanket, a reminder that my father had believed in me. I called the insurance company. The agent was apologetic but firm. "That policy was cashed out 6 months ago, Miss Stewart." The funds were distributed to the co-beneficiary. "Co-beneficiary?" I said. "I was the only beneficiary." "According to our records, your mother, Patricia Stewart, was added as co-beneficiary 2 years ago, and she approved the withdrawal." I hung up and called my mother immediately. "For once," she answered. "You stole my insurance money," I said. I was past diplomacy, past trying to preserve family bonds. "Madison needed it for her wedding," Patricia said coldly. "You were never going to use it anyway. You have your business." "I had my business," I said, past tense. "Madison destroyed it, and you helped her." "You always were dramatic," Patricia said. "Madison is getting married. She deserves to have a beautiful wedding. You're just jealous that she found someone who loves her." "How did you get access to that policy?" I asked. "I never signed anything." Patricia was silent for a moment too long. Then she said, "You're my daughter. I know your signature." She hung up before I could respond. She had forged my signature. My own mother had committed fraud to steal my inheritance and give it to Madison. The money was gone, and I had no way to prove the forgery without hiring a lawyer. I couldn't afford to sue my own mother. I sat on the floor of my apartment, surrounded by the boxes I was supposed to be packing for my forced move, and felt the last threads of my old life unraveling. No business, no partner, no clients, no family, no friends, no money, no home in 3 weeks, no car because it had been repossessed 2 days ago when I missed the payment. I had $200 in my checking account. That was it. That was all that was left of Colleen Stewart, business owner, after Madison had finished with me. It was raining that evening. I sat on the curb outside a convenience store, having walked the 2 miles from my apartment because I had no car. I was supposed to be buying groceries with my last $200, trying to figure out how to make it stretch for the next month. Instead, I sat in the rain and felt the complete dissolution of everything I had built. A car pulled up beside me, the window rolled down. "Get in out of the rain," a voice said. I looked up. It was Richard Hartwell. I was too exhausted to be surprised, too broken to question why he was there. I climbed into the warm car, dripping water onto his leather seats. He drove me to a coffee shop without speaking. Inside, he bought me coffee I didn't want and sat across from me in a quiet corner booth. "Miss Stewart," he said, "I need to tell you something, and I need to know if what I suspect is true." He pulled out a folder. Inside were documents, screenshots, bank records, witness statements. "I hired a private investigator," he said, "not to investigate you, to investigate Madison." He met my eyes. I didn't build my company by being a fool. Something about that dinner felt wrong. The way she spoke, the way your mother performed, it was too practiced, too perfect. The investigator had found everything. The fake social media accounts, the forged insurance withdrawal, the timeline showing Madison had started dating Derek right after learning about my company's bid for the Hartwell contract. Text messages between Madison and Derek showing they had deliberately sabotaged my business. Financial records proving Madison had been systematically destroying my professional reputation. Richard slid the folder across to me. "I'm disgusted with my son's involvement in this," he said. "But the question is, what are you going to do about it?" I looked at the evidence. For weeks, I had been playing defense, trying to protect myself, trying to prove I wasn't what Madison claimed. I had been trying to preserve relationships that were never real, trying to defend myself to people who wanted to believe I was guilty. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I'm tired. I'm broke. I'm being evicted. Maybe I should just let her win." Richard's expression hardened. "I didn't get where I am by letting people walk over me," he said. "And I don't respect people who do." He stood up. "I'm not offering to fix this for you, Miss Stewart, but I am offering you information and asking what you'll do with it. Because if you're the kind of person who lies down when attacked, then maybe Madison was right that you can't be trusted in business." He left me sitting there with the folder. I opened it again, reading through the evidence more carefully. Madison had been so careful, so calculating. But she had left a trail. She had gotten confident, even arrogant, and Richard's investigator had followed that trail all the way back to the beginning. Something shifted in me. Something that had been bending under pressure suddenly hardened into steel. I had spent my whole life being the good daughter, the responsible one, the peacekeeper. I had tried to earn love from people incapable of giving it. I had made myself small and quiet and grateful for crumbs of affection. Madison had mistaken my kindness for weakness. She had thought I would break. Instead, she had pushed me to a place where I had nothing left to lose. And a person with nothing to lose is dangerous. I called Richard from the coffee shop. "I need copies of everything your investigator found," I said. "And I need a lawyer's name. Someone good." There was a smile in his voice when he replied, "I'll email you the information within the hour. For what it's worth, Miss Stewart, I think you're finally asking the right questions." That night, I sat in my nearly empty apartment surrounded by evidence of my sister's conspiracy. I had 3 weeks until Madison's wedding. 3 weeks until she stood in front of 200 people and celebrated her victory over me. 3 weeks to build a response to months of systematic destruction. I wasn't going to that wedding to grovel or to play servant. I was going to tell the truth. All of it. In front of everyone who mattered. And I was going to let Madison face the consequences of her own cruelty. For the first time in weeks, I slept soundly. Not because my problems were solved, but because I finally knew what I was going to do about them. The next morning, I met with Mr. Walsh, my father's old lawyer. He was in his 70s now, mostly retired, but he had loved my father like a brother. His office smelled like old books and coffee. He hugged me when I arrived, and the kindness of it almost broke me. I explained everything that had happened. He listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each revelation. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Colleen," he said finally, "there's something you need to know, something I should have told you 3 years ago." He pulled out a file from his cabinet. Inside was a document I had never seen before. My father's will. A different will than the one that had been filed in probate court. "Your father created 2 wills," Mr. Walsh explained. "The first one, the public one, left his small business and insurance policy to you and the house to your mother. But 6 months before he died, he came to see me. He had discovered your mother was having an affair. He had also realized how she favored Madison over you, how cruel she was to you when he wasn't watching. He showed me the second will. It was dated 6 months before my father's death, properly witnessed and notarized. In this will, my father left everything to me. The house, which was now worth $400,000. Additional investment accounts I hadn't known existed. Family heirlooms that Patricia had sold years ago. The total value was roughly $600,000. Your mother was his executor, Mr. Walsh said. She buried this will and only filed the first one. I kept copies because your father asked me to, but I never challenged it because you seemed stable and successful. I thought you knew and had chosen not to fight it. Patricia had committed fraud. She had suppressed my father's true wishes and stolen my inheritance. And the statute of limitations hadn't run out yet. I have the originals, Mr. Walsh said. They're properly executed and legally binding. This will supersedes the first one. You're owed everything he intended you to have. I sat in his office holding my father's true will and felt something break open inside me. My father had known. He had seen how Patricia treated me, and he had tried to protect me, even after his death. Patricia had stolen that protection and used the money to fund Madison's war against me. Over the next several days, I built my case methodically. Richard Hartwell's investigator had given me the evidence of Madison's conspiracy. Mr. Walsh provided the suppressed will and proof of Patricia's fraud. I tracked down Jenna, who was so terrified of legal consequences that she gave me a sworn statement about Madison's threats and bribes. I gathered bank records showing the forged insurance withdrawal. I compiled screenshots of the fake social media accounts with metadata proving I hadn't created them. Each piece of evidence was a thread, and together they wove a picture of systematic, calculated destruction. Richard Hartwell contacted me again. We met at his office this time, a gleaming space on the 42nd floor of downtown's most prestigious building. He was direct. I confronted Derek with the evidence, he said. He denied everything at first, but I found his personal text messages with Madison. He knew about the plan to destroy your business. He actively helped sabotage you. He paused, his expression granite. My son has embarrassed the Hartwell name and violated every principle I raised him with. He slid a document across his desk. This is a contract. If you handle this situation discreetly, without publicly implicating Hartwell Industries, I'll restore your business contract. Additionally, I'm offering to invest $200,000 in your company for 15% equity. I'll personally refer you to my business network. He met my eyes. But you cannot mention my company's name in whatever you're planning. Deal with Madison and my son however you see fit. Leave my business reputation intact. It was more than fair. It was generous. I signed without hesitation. With Richard's backing, I began rebuilding quietly. I used the first investment installment to secure a new apartment. I started reaching out to former clients, carefully explaining that there had been a misunderstanding, that false information had been spread, that I was addressing it legally. Some believed me, some didn't, but it was a start. I filed legal paperwork challenging my father's probate case. Armed with Mr. Walsh's documentation, I prepared evidence folders with everything I had gathered. Copies for Madison, copies for Patricia, copies for Derek, copies for the police regarding the forgery and fraud. Madison texted me regularly, her messages dripping with false sweetness. Just confirming you're not coming to my wedding? Too ashamed? I responded simply, I'll be there. She texted back immediately. Good. We'll need someone to coordinate the vendors since you paid for everything. Wear something appropriate. She thought I was coming to grovel, to play servant one last time. She thought she had beaten me completely. I didn't correct her assumption. Let her think she had won. Let her relax into her victory. It would make the fall that much harder. 2 weeks before the wedding, Patricia called me. It was the first time we had spoken since she hung up on me about the insurance money. Her voice was falsely warm, as if nothing had happened between us. Colleen, honey, I heard you're back on your feet somehow. Let's have lunch. I miss you. I agreed to meet her. We sat at an outdoor cafe, spring sunlight making everything look deceptively cheerful. Patricia ordered a salad and talked about gardening, the weather, her book club. She didn't mention Madison or the wedding until dessert arrived. Madison is so happy with Derek, she said, watching me carefully. I hope you're not planning to cause any trouble at the wedding. Family is everything, Colleen. Your father would have wanted you to support your sister. The invocation of my father, the man whose will she had buried, the man whose wishes she had violated, was too much. But I kept my expression neutral. I won't cause trouble, I said, which was technically true. I was going to tell the truth. If that caused trouble, it was Madison's own actions coming home to roost. Patricia relaxed visibly. I always knew you'd come around, she said, reaching across to pat my hand. You were always the weak one who needed family. That final cruelty, delivered so casually over tiramisu, cemented every last doubt I had about what I was planning. These people had no love for me. They never had. I had been useful when I could be controlled and disposable when I couldn't. I went home and looked at myself in the mirror. I barely recognized the woman staring back. I had lost weight. I couldn't afford to lose. My clothes hung loose. My face looked older, sharper, harder. But my eyes were clear and determined. I wasn't the person I had been before Madison's engagement party. That woman had been soft, willing to sacrifice herself to keep the peace. This woman was done sacrificing. The night before Madison's wedding, I sat in my new apartment, surrounded by evidence folders. Everything was organized, documented, undeniable. I had rehearsed what I would say until the words felt natural. I had contacted several of my former clients who would be at the wedding, giving them a heads up that the truth would come out tomorrow. I wasn't nervous, I was calm. I had spent weeks being destroyed, and now I was going to show everyone exactly who had done the destroying and why. I looked at a photo on my phone. My father and me at my college graduation. He looked so proud. I wished he could see me now, standing up for myself, refusing to be erased. I whispered to the photo. Tomorrow I take my life back, Dad. Tomorrow they learn what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. I went to bed early and slept deeply. When my alarm woke me at 6, I felt more rested than I had in months. It was wedding day. It was truth day. It was the day Colleen Stewart stopped being a victim and became a woman who fought back. The wedding venue was even more magnificent in daylight. 200 guests filled the chairs overlooking the garden ceremony space. White flowers everywhere, a string quartet playing, champagne being served on silver trays. Madison had spared no expense, mostly because it was my money paying for it. Madison had spared no expense. I arrived wearing an elegant emerald dress I had bought specifically for this occasion. Not too flashy, not too plain, professional and pulled together. I looked like someone who had her life under control, which was exactly the impression I wanted to give. Madison saw me arrive and her face flickered with annoyance before settling into a sneer. "Oh good, the help arrived," she said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. Laughter rippled around us. She thought she was still in control of the narrative. I smiled and said nothing. I took my seat toward the back and watched the ceremony unfold. Madison looked beautiful in her designer gown, Derek looked uncomfortable in his tuxedo, and Patricia cried decorative tears in the front row. It was a performance of perfect happiness, built entirely on lies and stolen money. When the ceremony concluded and everyone moved to the reception, I felt my heartbeat accelerate slightly. This was it. No going back after this moment. The reception was in the grand ballroom, the same room where Madison had humiliated me at the engagement party. Full circle. The irony wasn't lost on me. Dinner was served, speeches were made, Derek's best man told embarrassing stories. Madison's maid of honor gushed about true love. And then Patricia stood up, microphone in hand. "And now," she announced with false cheer, "a toast from the bride's sister." The room quieted. Everyone turned to look at me. Madison's smirk was triumphant. She thought this was another chance to watch me squirm, to force me to publicly praise her while swallowing my humiliation. Patricia had set this up as one final degradation. I stood and walked to the microphone. Patricia handed it to me with a saccharine smile. I smiled back, just as sweetly, and turned to face the 200 guests. "I'm so happy to be here celebrating Madison's special day," I began warmly, "especially in this beautiful venue that I paid for as my gift." Madison's smile tightened, but she kept her composure. "But I want to clarify something Madison said at the engagement party. Something about me owing the family money, about making amends for taking something." I paused, letting the curiosity build. I reached into my clutch and pulled out the first evidence folder. "I want to share the truth with everyone here." I began walking between tables, placing copies of documents in front of key guests. Richard Hartwell got the first copy. Madison's boss got another. Derek's family members. My former clients. Important people who needed to see proof. "This is my father's true will," I said clearly. The one my mother Patricia suppressed. The room erupted in gasps and whispers. My father left everything to me in his final will, created 6 months before he died. Patricia committed fraud by hiding it and filing only the first will. She stole over $600,000 that legally belonged to me. Patricia was on her feet. She's lying. She's always been jealous. But I had documentation, proper legal documents, signed and witnessed and notarized. Mr. Walsh had provided certified copies. I had proof, and I was showing it to everyone who mattered. "Madison knew about the fraud," I continued, my voice steady. "She has been systematically destroying my life to prevent me from discovering the truth about my inheritance." I distributed more evidence folders. These are screenshots of fake social media accounts Madison created in my name. These are bank records showing she forged my signature to steal my father's insurance money. These are text messages between Madison and Derek planning how to sabotage my business. Madison was shouting now, her voice shrill. "This is my wedding! You're ruining my wedding!" I kept going, methodical and calm. "Many of you heard terrible things about me over the past months, that I was unstable, that I neglected my dying mother, that I couldn't be trusted." Every single story came from Madison and Patricia. Every story was a calculated lie. I presented testimony from Jenna, documentation from Richard's investigator, statements from Mr. Walsh. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. One of my former clients stood up, his face red. "You told me she was having a breakdown," he said to Madison. "You cost her my business based on lies." Richard Hartwell rose to his feet. "I've seen all this evidence," he said, his voice carrying across the shocked room. "My son participated in this conspiracy. He used the Hartwell name to damage Miss Stewart's business without my knowledge or permission. Effective immediately, Derek is removed from Hartwell Industries." Derek's face drained white. He turned to Madison. You told me she was the problem. You said she was unstable. You lied to me. I addressed the room once more. I'm filing legal papers to claim my rightful inheritance. I'm also filing restraining orders against Madison and Patricia. Derek Hartwell and Madison Thompson are being sued for business interference and defamation. The evidence has been submitted to police regarding fraud and forgery. I turned to Madison directly. You tried to take everything from me. Instead, you're facing legal consequences, public humiliation, and you've destroyed your own marriage before it even started. Derek was backing away from Madison, realization and horror on his face. My father just disowned me because of you. He looked at Madison like he was seeing her for the first time. You used me. You lied to everyone. He walked out of the reception. Madison ran after him, her wedding dress trailing behind her, makeup running down her face. Derek! Derek, wait! We can fix this. But he was gone, and so was Madison's perfect day. The ballroom erupted in noise. Some guests were applauding me. Others were leaving in shock. Patricia tried to approach me, but I held up a hand. Stay away from both of us. The lawyers will be in touch. She looked suddenly old, diminished, the weight of her actions finally visible on her face. I took the microphone one final time. I came here today not for revenge, but for truth. I spent months being destroyed by people who were supposed to love me. I learned that some people will do anything for money and status, but I also learned that I'm stronger than I ever knew. I paused, looking around the room. I don't need people who betray me. I don't need family who hurts me. I'm walking away from this with my dignity, my truth, and my future intact. I set down the microphone and walked out of the ballroom. My head was high, my steps were steady. I felt lighter than I had in months. Not triumphant, exactly, but free. I was done protecting people who didn't deserve it. I was done making myself small. I had reclaimed my voice, my story, and my power. In the parking lot, Richard Hartwell caught up with me. Miss Stewart, wait. He was slightly out of breath. That took real courage. I turned to face him. Thank you for believing me when no one else did. He smiled. I meant what I said about the investment. Let's meet next week to discuss your company's future. You're the kind of person I want to do business with. Someone who stands up for herself. I shook his hand. I'd like that very much. I drove away from the venue feeling a sense of completion. The wedding I had paid for had turned into the stage for my vindication. Madison's perfect day had become the setting for her downfall, and I had done it all with nothing but the truth and the courage to speak it in front of everyone who mattered. 3 months after Madison's wedding, I stood in my new office looking out over the city. The sign on the door read Colleen Stewart Properties, LLC in clean professional letters. No partners this time. Just me, building something that was entirely mine. Richard Hartwell's investment and referrals had transformed my business. Premium clients lined up to work with someone Richard Hartwell personally endorsed. My revenue was up 60% from before Madison's campaign against me. I had hired 3 employees, carefully selected people I trusted. We operated on principles of integrity and transparency, and our reputation was growing daily. The legal resolutions had come through faster than expected. The probate court ruled in my favor. My father's true will was recognized, and I received my full inheritance. The house that should have been mine, the investment accounts Patricia had hidden, the life insurance money Madison had stolen, all of it returned, plus restitution payments for the years Patricia had illegally kept it. Madison and Derek's marriage had lasted exactly 3 weeks before Derek filed for annulment. He had realized too late that Madison had targeted him specifically because of his family's business connection to me. Their entire relationship had been strategic on her part. Derek had lost his position at Hartwell Industries, lost his father's respect, and gained nothing but public humiliation and legal bills. The defamation lawsuit settled. Madison and Derek paid me $30,000 in damages. Criminal charges for forgery were filed against Madison. Patricia faced charges as well for her role in suppressing the will. Both were looking at potential jail time and certain financial ruin from legal fees. I sold the family house immediately. Too many bad memories, too much pain embedded in those walls. I bought a beautiful modern condo downtown instead, with floor-to-ceiling windows and clean lines and space that felt like mine alone. I decorated it exactly how I wanted, with no one else's opinion considered. Every morning I woke up in that space and felt grateful for my freedom. Patricia had tried to reach out once, a long email about how she was still my mother, how family should forgive, how I was being cruel to hold grudges. I had blocked her email without responding. A mother protects her child. Patricia had spent years undermining me, favoring Madison, and ultimately helping to destroy my life for money. She was no mother of mine. Not in any way that mattered. Madison had attempted contact too, showing up at my office building one desperate afternoon. Security called me before letting her up. She wants to apologize, the guard said. I told him to send her away. Some betrayals are too deep, too calculated to forgive. Madison hadn't made a mistake. She had orchestrated a months-long campaign to erase me. That wasn't something you apologized away. My new life included new relationships built on honesty and mutual respect. Richard Hartwell had become an unexpected mentor, teaching me about scaling a business and navigating corporate relationships. We met monthly for coffee, and his advice had been invaluable. I had reconnected with real friends, people who had never believed Madison's lies, who had waited patiently for the truth to emerge. They welcomed me back into their lives with warmth and understanding. And I was dating someone new. Grant taught high school history and coached soccer, and he had no connection to my business world or family drama. He knew my whole story because I had told him on our third date, laying out every ugly detail. He had listened without judgment and said, "You're incredibly strong." Most people would have given up. His simple acceptance had meant everything. My company was featured in a regional business magazine with the headline, "How I Rebuilt After Betrayal: One Entrepreneur's Story." The article focused on resilience, integrity, and the importance of documentation. Other people reached out afterward, sharing their own stories of family betrayal and business sabotage. I realized my experience, as painful as it had been, could help others recognize and escape similar situations. One quiet afternoon, I was leaving my favorite coffee shop when I saw Madison across the street. She looked tired, worn down in a way that had nothing to do with physical appearance and everything to do with consequences catching up. Our eyes met. For a moment, I felt a flicker of the old pain, the old connection of shared childhood, shared DNA, shared history. Madison looked like she might approach. I took a breath, steadied myself, and simply nodded once. Acknowledgement without engagement. Recognition without reconciliation. Then I walked past her. My steps sure and unhurried. Madison was no longer my problem or my responsibility. She was simply a person I used to know who had made terrible choices. That evening, I recorded a video for my company's social media. I had been thinking about sharing my story more publicly, offering hope to others in similar situations. I sat in my office as the sun set and spoke directly to the camera. I learned that sometimes the people who hurt you most are the ones closest to you, I said. I learned that you can't control how people treat you, only how you respond. I learned that defending yourself isn't mean, it's necessary. Walking away from toxicity isn't giving up, it's choosing yourself. I paused, gathering my thoughts. I learned that you're never too broken to rebuild. That your worth isn't determined by people who can't see it. That making yourself small doesn't make others comfortable. It just makes you invisible. The video response was overwhelming. Hundreds of comments from people sharing similar experiences, thanking me for speaking up, asking for advice. I realized that my pain had been transformed into purpose. By refusing to stay silent, by fighting back against injustice, I had created something valuable beyond my own healing. For years, I explained in a follow-up video, I tried to earn love from people incapable of giving it. I made myself small, hoping it would make them comfortable. I sacrificed my dignity for peace that was never real. The moment I stopped trying to prove my worth to them, I found it within myself. The deeper truth was simple but profound. You teach people how to treat you. I had been teaching Madison and Patricia that I would accept anything, that I would absorb any cruelty to preserve family bonds. When I finally set boundaries and demanded respect, some people couldn't meet me there, and that was okay. The people who truly mattered, the Richard Hartwells and Grants and real friends of the world, they respected boundaries. They valued honesty. They appreciated strength. The people who don't? They were never my people to begin with. I kept my father's photo on my desk, the one from my college graduation. Sometimes I talk to it, updating him on my progress. "I hope you're proud, Dad," I whispered one evening after closing a major deal. "I finally stood up for myself the way you always wanted me to." I felt at peace in a way I never had before. Not because everything was perfect, but because everything was honest. My relationships were real. My success was earned. My life was mine, built on my own terms with my own values. My phone rang. A new client referral, someone Richard had recommended. I answered professionally. "This is Colleen. How can I help you?" Simple words. But they represented everything I had fought for. I was helping people now on my own terms, building a business based on integrity, living a life that reflected my values. To anyone dealing with family betrayal or toxic relationships, I wanted to say this clearly. You are not obligated to sacrifice yourself for people who wouldn't do the same. You are allowed to walk away. You are allowed to choose yourself. And when you do, you might discover something amazing. You were always strong enough. You were always enough. You just needed permission to believe it. Consider this your permission. Madison had tried to destroy me, to erase me, to reduce me to nothing. Instead, she had freed me. She had pushed me so far down that I had discovered bedrock, the unbreakable core of who I really was. And from that foundation, I had rebuilt something stronger and truer than anything I had before. I stood at my office window as the city lights came on, reflecting in the glass. I saw myself reflected too. Not the broken woman sitting in the rain 3 months ago, not the humiliated sister at the engagement party, but a strong, successful, free woman who had fought for her dignity and won. I smiled at my reflection. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new growth. But tonight, I celebrated how far I had come. From victim to survivor to someone thriving on her own terms. Madison had wanted to take everything from me. Instead, she had given me the greatest gift, even if she didn't mean to. She had forced me to find my strength, to discover my voice, to learn that I could stand alone and not just survive, but flourish. I was Colleen Stewart. Business owner, survivor, free woman, and nobody, not Madison, not Patricia, not anyone, would ever make me feel small again. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to walk away from toxic family members or relationships to protect yourself? How did you find the strength to set boundaries with people who were supposed to love you? Share your story in the comments. Your experience might help someone else who's struggling right now. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. It helps others find these stories and know they're not alone. Subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming betrayal and finding strength. And share this with someone who needs to hear that they're strong enough to choose themselves, even when it's hard. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. Remember that your worth is inherent, not earned through sacrifice or suffering. You deserve relationships that honor your dignity. You deserve to be valued, not diminished. And you always have the right to walk away from people who can't see your worth. Stay strong, stay true to yourself, and never let anyone make you smaller than you are. Until next time.